Hello and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast, where we listen to people's fairy encounters. But take heed, we're not talking about winged Tinkerbells here. These are real fairies, real encounters that took people like you and I by surprise. Stay a while and hear their stories. My name is Jo Hickey Hall, and I'm a folklore researcher. Hello dear listener, I hope you're well, and I hope you have also felt the uplift that Imbolc seemed to bring here in the Northern Hemisphere. The energies seem to lift on around February the 2nd, and many more are beginning to be able to imagine a brighter future for us all, so let's hope that this is all going in the right direction. I've had lots of lovely communications with people lately. Some are sharing their experiences and others just getting in contact to tell me how much the show means to them. Many say that they feel understood and thankful that these encounters are being discussed openly. I never fail to feel honoured and humbled every time I hear one of these stories. This project has always had its own momentum, and where it goes I follow. There's nothing else I'd rather do, and I'm really moved whenever I hear that it means so much to others too. I was recently given the opportunity to write a piece about the Woollerton Gnomes along with some brilliant contributors. It's just been released on Amazon as a pamphlet by Dr. Simon Young. I'm speaking to more and more researchers all the time, and we have some exciting interviews lined up. Lots of you enjoyed the chat with Joshua Cutchin, which I'll also be releasing on video soon on the YouTube channel for Modern Fairy Sightings. As you may know, the main aim of this project is to collect and share people's experiences, giving individuals a chance to describe their encounters in their own words. This year I'm writing a book of collected experiences and some thoughts on the factors involved when considering such events. Though I have a desk job during the day, I run this project in my spare time, and I really rely on listeners' support to keep it going. So if you enjoy the show, there are several ways to help. One way is to support by joining Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast at Patreon, where we have a beautiful, intimate community building there, and big shout out and massive thank you to my amazing curious crew who are just blossoming and forging links with one another, which is really beautiful to see. That's what this project was all about, and we're just sharing some great times and ideas with each other and presenting different ways of viewing this mysterious universe. This community is also where I share exclusive clips of more in-depth discussions with guests. If you prefer to make a one-off donation, you can find the podcast at Buy Me a Coffee. I realise not everyone can contribute financially though. What really helps move things along is to subscribe to this show on your app and rate it. And if you can take the time to leave a review, just a sentence or two, that would be absolutely wonderful. Above all though, please remember to share it with one friend whom you think might enjoy it. Thank you. This episode is truly spectacular, and I thank our guest for choosing to share her personal experience with us. It's a very rich discussion and forms the first of a two-part conversation. What follows here is a childhood experience. Many of us have memories of extraordinary encounters as young children, and hearing this particular experience resonated very deeply with me personally. Much of the phenomena described here I feel familiar with, and I just know that it will be the same for many of you out there. Do get in touch if you recognise these sorts of events. I had begun to discuss these encounters with fellow researchers early last year, more on that at the end, but suffice to say I have a sense that we'll be exploring this theme as this year develops. As always, while these discussions feature fairies, they are not suitable for children or anyone that might be spooked out or upset by creepy content. I hope you enjoy this chat. Time to
If you hear a slight American accent, it's because I've spent half my life in the States and my husband is American too. So, yeah.
Whereabouts in America did you live?
Oh gosh, I lived everywhere. I've lived everywhere from Alaska to Arizona. So, amazing. Yeah.
When did you get back to the UK then?
About 10 years ago. I really wanted to come home. It was the same feeling as Sam and must have when it decided it has to go back from the sea to the stream. I just had to come back here, and fortunately we were able to make that happen.
I'm from Jersey, Channel Islands, and
Lovely there.
it is lovely there. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And we live in Bristol at the moment. We moved here 8 years ago. There's something about where you were born. For me, it's the sea. I really miss the sea.
I missed the land.
Yeah.
Because although I lived in some very beautiful places in the States, I didn't connect with the land the same way as I do in Britain, because I'm of this land, if that makes any sense at all to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely understand that feeling.
I think I'd like to start with the earliest ones that I can recall. I was always aware of something other going on in the garden. My bedroom as a young child, all the time I lived in my parents' home, overlooked the back garden, and I would often see lights, small lights dancing, what looked like to be dancing and moving in this one flower bed. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the flowers called pinks. They're a kind of small carnation that had this wonderful clove-like perfume. And I would sneak out of the house at night, and I have to be very careful because every stair creaked and my mother would wake at the drop of a pin. So I would sneak out, not only in the summertime, but also in the winter when it was snowing, and dance in the garden.
Lovely.
But the incident that I'd like to tell you about occurred actually in my bedroom. I was in my bed, nighttime, everyone in the house was asleep as far as I can remember. I must have been maybe 4 or 5 years old, I'm not sure. Very young anyway. And there was light coming in through the window. I always had the curtains open.
Yeah.
And there was light coming in through the windows. So there were no street lights at the back of the house where my bedroom faced. So it must have been moonlight. And I heard a sound, and I noticed to the left of me, and I looked across the room, and to the left was the bedroom door, and I saw it opening. And in through the door came I'd call it like not a parade, but a host of small people. And they were chattering and not dancing, but moving back and forth. And they didn't come in single file. They came in like a stream, and they all seemed very excited. And they came in, there must have been about, I'd say 30 or 40 of them. And they came in, and they came along the wall from the door towards my bed, and I'm just watching them. And they went along the left side of my bed, down to the foot of my bed, round the foot of my bed, where I kind of lost sight of them. And then I heard them coming around the right-hand side of my bed at the bottom, and I looked out, and they started to come. The leader came up onto the bed and stood at the foot of the bed, and I could see the rest of them starting to come up. That's all I remember from that first experience of them. I remember telling my mother about it, but I saw them many times after that, but in dreams. I didn't see them again while I was awake. I don't remember being afraid the first time I saw them. I think it was my mother that made me feel afraid, because in the dreams, it was the same sort of incident. The door would open, they would come around the bed, get on the bottom of the bed. But I knew the dreams were dreams because they would begin with my bedroom windows flying open, my slippers walking onto a small rug, and the rug levitating and going out the window, and then the door would open. The small people would come in around my bed, and when they started to come up onto the bed on the right hand side at the bottom, in my dream I would flee out of the bed through the bedroom door and fly down the dark staircase, land at the bottom, and turn the knob into the living room, the doorknob on, the knob on the door into the living room. Apparently, that's when I used to sleepwalk, and my mother said they'd be sitting in the living room, and the door would open, and I'd just be standing there staring, and she would get up, or my father would, and I'd still be asleep, and they'd carry me back upstairs and put me back into bed.
Oh, goodness me! Wow. And were they able to tell you anything else about the way that you looked when you would appear at the doorway? Healing has helped me many times in my life when I'd reached a point where something needed to change. In 2005, I trained with Martin Brofman to learn the body mirror system of healing, which was life-changing for me. It's based on the idea that the parts of your body that don't work well reflect the parts of your life that don't work well, and about which you have tension in your consciousness. The understanding is that tension is stress, and stress causes symptoms. In a distance healing or in-person session, I move up the chakras, returning each one to wholeness using a colour map. During the process, I see images and situations, I hear words or receive impressions that tell me something about what caused the tension in that person's life. The feedback at the end of the session is a really big part of the healing. If you're interested in a chakra healing session, you can contact me at scarletofthefae@gmail.com.
They said I was just staring, just standing still and staring as if I was in a trance. There was no other movement. I was just like standing. I wasn't moving. I was just staring ahead.
Oh my goodness me. And when they put you back into bed, did you just go back to sleep then?
I have no idea.
I don't know, because you're so little.
I don't remember them carrying me or putting me into bed. This is what I was told.
Yeah.
Because every time I had what became the dream, and I had it repeatedly through my childhood, it started not to become so frequent.
Okay.
The interesting part is when a friend stayed over. I was 16, going on 17, and a friend stayed over for the night, and he slept in my room, and I slept in my mother's room with her. And my mother had the habit of, when we got up in the mornings, she would say to us, "Did you have any interesting dreams?" And so I was down. He stayed the night. I was downstairs the next morning with my mum. She was making breakfast. She made tea, pot of tea, and he came down the stairs and into the kitchen, and good morning and everything, sat down at the kitchen table. And as my mum was, doing breakfast and everything, she said, "Did you have any interesting dreams?" As was her norm. And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I had the really strangest dream." He said, "I dreamt that I was just lying there and I heard a noise, and I looked across and the bedroom door opened, and this group of little people came in, and they came all the way up to the bed, and they went around down the bottom of the foot of the bed, and they started to get on the bed, and I woke up."
Amazing.
And my mother and I just, because I hadn't told anyone but my mum, he had no knowledge of this dream. And we just looked at each other like there was nothing to say. It was just drop jaw moment, because he experienced the exact same thing in that room. And the bed was in the same place.
Oh my goodness.
In that room.
Yeah. And was he excited or pleased by the dream, or was he frightened? Was it a worry that he'd had that dream? for him?
He wasn't a worry. He was quite excited about having the dream. But when I told him that's the dream, you've just told me exactly the dream I've had repeatedly for years, and he was like, no, and my mum said, yes.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And he was pretty amazed at that.
Yeah. Did that freak him out a bit then, do you think?
A little bit, yeah. I think
wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think it didn't freak me out. I think it freaked my mum out a little bit, but I knew what I'd seen all those years ago, and I knew that it had warped into a dream that took place during dream time, let's say, and he'd had the exact same dream.
Yeah.
Later in life, about 2008 or so, I was doing some research, because lots of things used to happen in that area, and in the house I grew up in, it was quite active. My mother was very psychic and we would see things all the time, but usually she'd label them as ghosts, spirits. But I did some research into the history of the area in about 2008, maybe 2009, to discover that this area was a place where there were a lot of battles between Saxons and Danes. The housing estate that our house was on was built in the mid to late 1920s, and they had leveled a low, the Anglo-Saxon low, the multi-burial lows after battles where they buried L-O-W-E. It used to be spelled, I think, H-L-A-E, something like low in Anglo-Saxon, in Old English. They had leveled that, and there were several in the area, Tumuli in the area. They'd leveled it to build this huge housing estate on.
Yeah. Wow. So
and that pretty amazed me when I read that.
Absolutely. So it's a really highly charged place and landscape.
It must have been, yes. I haven't lived there since I was 18 going on 19, but yeah.
And even before the battle, on another level, it makes you wonder what drew the battle to be there as well. What was there before the battle even?
The nearest place is about a mile away, is named after Woden.
That is really quite something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Gosh, yeah. So, I mean, I was going to ask about your mum, because I love what a wonderful start to the day. Did you have any interesting dreams? What an amazing mum to have. I think that's just great. And did she have any interesting dreams?
I'm sure she did. I don't recall any in particular, but she encouraged us to share our dreams, and sometimes would interpret dreams. She also encouraged us spiritually, psychically, to not be afraid of experiencing seeing alternate things.
Yeah. And where did she get her way of being from?
I don't know. It couldn't have been her mother, because to me, my maternal grandmother was an absolute tyrant. So a very matter of fact and down to earth lady. So typical matriarchs of the time. So I don't know that it was through her, but I really don't know, Jo.
And what about your dad?
My father barely spoke.
Okay.
I was a change of life child. My mum was in her mid-40s when I was born, and my father was much older and close to retirement. My father was born in 1898.
Amazing.
And my mum was born in 1912.
Oh, wow.
So I had quite an old-fashioned upbringing, as in there was still a lot of superstition that I was taught, and the older way of seeing things, if you kind of grab my meaning.
Yes, absolutely. So lovely. I really resonate with what you're saying there as well, because there's something about being able to reach back into the past within not too many generations. I think about the way that the kind of vibrancy of that's not the word, is it? The something that kind of remains in the genes, I think. That's just me kind of floating away with that there, really. But
in sort of ancestral memory within the body.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah. So I do find that interesting. And what about so you don't know anything about your mum's dad?
He had died by the time I was born. I don't know really that much about them, and I know nothing about my father's family at all.
And do you know where your ancestry is? Do you know where your mother's family was from?
Well, my father was local to the area, and they're both local both Staffordshire families.
Yeah.
But my mother has some Welsh blood through the maternal side. It's quite vague. My father, nothing much was told me about my father. He really wasn't a very talkative man at all. He was very quiet. But on my mother's side, her father didn't know who his father was. So there's also this sort of mystery stuff. There's always been this mystery stuff going on in our family that is just really annoying.
I'm sure most families have these mysteries. Yeah, just thinking back to when the host came trooping in. How big would you say they were? How tall?
I would say, well, they weren't all the same size.
Oh.
They were close to the same size. Like you see a crowd of people, they're not always the same height, are they?
No.
Some are shorter than others, some are taller, and different shapes of body and different ages. And they were like that. There were no children. I wouldn't say there were any children, but they seemed to be young and older. They were I'd say about the tallest, I'd say 18 inches.
Okay. So fairly big. So, and how many of them do you think? You said about 30 or 40.
There was about 30 at least. And some were small. I'd say they range between a foot and 18 inches.
Yeah, got you. Yeah.
And they were very excited, and they were chattering, and their voice, I couldn't hear what they were saying. Their voices were quite high. And they were like chattering amongst themselves as they streamed in, but the leader knew exactly where he was going.
What did he, so it was obviously he then, so what did he look like?
He had a beard and a moustache, and I'd say it was like a silvery color, not white. It was like a silvery color. And he was stout. He was wearing a pointed cap, and he was wearing, I'd say, the kind of, was it, you see sometimes in Victorian or Georgian series movies that they end just below the knee, and they have the stockings underneath with the shoes as well. So like his trousers didn't come all the way down to the ankle. They kind of ended at maybe like high socks or something that met the trousers. And he was wearing a jacket, and I believe he had a waistcoat on.
And what was his expression?
He didn't look unkind. He wasn't threatening, but it was like he was on a mission. He was on his way to do something. And I think I firmly believe that something was to take me with them.
Yeah. And what about the rest of them? What were their expressions like?
They were happy. They were happy, excited. The one female that I remember that was very close to the head of the
Yeah.
let's call it not a procession, but the head of the throng. She looked very pleasant, but determined also. Very, we're here to achieve something. Yeah.
So, what was your initial reaction? What did you feel? As in, what did you feel in your body when you saw them?
When I actually saw them, not the
Yeah.
dream, or when I saw them,
Yeah, when you saw them.
I was just watching. I was interested. I was like, well, who is this? And I was used to thinking I saw fairies in the garden, what I termed fairies. I've never seen anything with wings, but so I thought maybe they'd come in from outside.
Yeah.
And I was watching them come in, and I was like, oh, they're coming in. They're coming round. Where are they going? Are they going down the foot of to around the end of the bed? And oh, now they're coming onto the bed. And when the leader, got on the bed and stood at the foot of the bed, he was about to talk to me, but that's all I remember.
Oh, interesting.
That's all I remember. I can't remember anything else from that first encounter.
So you can't remember what he said or what happened next?
No, he was standing there looking straight at me in my eyes, but I cannot remember anything after that actual encounter.
So, I mean, do you think potentially there was lost time there? It's hard to say, isn't it?
I think I was too young to. I mean, I was like 4 or 5 years old, and I'm now 66. So even though that memory has always stayed with me, I can't tell you if there was lost time or not. I have experienced lost time later on in Orkney, but then in the bedroom, I don't know. I have no memory after that whatsoever. I just know that they were there to ask me to go with them, or to take me with them.
And with their the way that they were speaking, did it sound like a language or something else?
Oh yes, definitely. They were all chattering amongst themselves.
Yeah.
But I couldn't hear it. It was not really. I'd call it tinkling, but that's not right.
Okay.
It was lots of little voices.
Okay.
As they were coming along, and I say some of them were skipping. The younger ones seemed to be skipping along, and the older ones like marching along, walking stately along.
Yeah. It sounds really joyful.
Yeah, I think I would call it that. Yeah.
So when you think about it now, when they first arrived in the bedroom, do you sense anywhere in your body now when you look back on it?
No, I think I was the feeling of interest in, oh, who is this? They must have come in from the garden. But no, I didn't feel any. There was no. Do you mean an emotion or a physical sensation?
Anything physical. So even right now in your body now, when you look back on that moment, do you feel it anywhere in particular?
Not really, no. I mean,
okay.
When I think of that moment, I hold my breath.
Yeah.
Automatically.
Yeah.
Breathe in and hold my breath, and I see him looking at me.
That's it. You sounded very apprehensive when you began to speak about him. I could tell in your voice that you immediately began to see it's kind of taking you back to that moment of apprehension. Yeah. Wow. So, what kind of clothes were they wearing?
I don't remember seeing all of their clothes individually. there were dark and light patches. They were carrying lanterns on like poles or long sticks.
Oh, that's lovely.
So some of them were illuminated and some weren't. Some were, you know, that chiaroscuro kind of, you know, the dark and the light as they were coming along. And he, although I don't think he was carrying a lantern, but he was illuminated. And the woman, the lead woman, she was definitely carrying a lantern on a pole. And I remember she was wearing, they weren't wearing flimsy clothing, they were wearing stout clothing like wool.
Yeah.
Like she was wearing like a thick wool skirt to the floor and like a bodice. They weren't wearing capes or anything. I remember some of the younger ones wearing like little trousers, maybe just to above the ankle or something. But most of them were in shadow. Only some of them were illuminated by the little lanterns on poles or on sticks.
So it was dark in your bedroom at the time?
It was, but I say there must have been light from the moon. My bedroom faced west, so there must have been light from the moon coming in.
Wow, it's really great. You said you dreamt of them afterwards.
Yes.
How often would you dream of them? Do you know?
I honestly can't remember, Joe.
It was just a recurring dream.
Yes.
I know what you mean, because I also had a recurring dream as a child, and but I could not tell you how often I dreamt it, but I know that it was something that used to happen quite a lot. Yeah, so I
do distinctly remember thinking as a child that when I turn 10 years old, my real family will come and get me. And by that, I didn't mean humans. And then I would turn 10 and it didn't happen. So I thought, well, when I turn 11, they'll come and get me. And I turned 11 and it didn't happen. So it was when I turned 12, they'll come and get me. And it didn't happen. So I gave up on thinking that.
But you were still having the dreams at the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was sleepwalking until I was in my early teens.
Goodness, yeah. Yeah. And so did you ever experience anything from the dreams? Did you ever wake up with any sense of having had any experience from your dreams? Was there anything else that ever happened that was connected to the dreams or when you woke up?
Not to my knowledge. I just remember having the dream in the night, but I don't remember waking up with my parents carrying me back to bed after sleepwalking. I don't recall that. I just recall, well, now maybe I did at the time, but now I just recall having that dream, a repetitive dream.
So the rug levitating.
Yes, it would start with the windows would fly open. My slippers would walk by themselves onto the small rug and it would levitate and fly out the window. And then the dream would begin.
Goodness,
and it would always end with me flying down this dark staircase and opening the door to the living room.
Wow. So I'm just wondering whether, when you said you saw your slippers get to the rug, whether that was you in those slippers and that was you going out of the window.
Oh, I've just got goosebumps all over me. I'd never thought of that before. Yes, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah.
So when you told your mum about your initial, I'm not sure, did you say that you did tell her about the initial experience or just the dreams? Yeah.
Yes.
What did she say?
She told me it was a dream.
Okay. And did she ask you any more about it?
She just asked me what they looked like, if they said anything. Yeah.
And did you tell her
I
the whole
think so.
thing?
Yeah, I think I must have. I don't. The memory of talking to her about that is as vague as
Yeah.
when I ran inside one day from playing with other kids and said we'd just seen a UFO, and she said, "That's nice, dear," and kept peeling the potato.
Oh my goodness. So when did that happen?
I was about 9, outside playing with several other children, and we saw this UFO come over the rooftops, but it wasn't like a machine UFO. It was like enclosed in a cloud, like a green cloud, and it was odd. But the
Yeah.
strangest thing is, on the news that night there were reports of a UFO being seen. So
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. What were the circumstances in which you saw the UFO?
we were all playing together outside,
Mm-hmm.
and there was about 6 or 7 children. All of us were about 9. I was about 9, and someone pointed up and went, "Look, look, it's a UFO." And we all looked up, and we saw this massive, huge thing coming over the rooftop. Actually, it came over the rooftop of the house I lived in.
Wow. Yeah.
And it was like clouds. It was like a dark cloud with green in it, and like illuminated green and different shades of green going into almost black. And we all just ran into our own homes. And I ran into the kitchen and the back door, and I said, "Mommy, we've just seen a UFO." And she just at the kitchen sink, "That's nice, dear," and carried on peeling the potatoes.
Your mum sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
She sounds like such a character. It feels like as well, I mean, you know, when she was asking you about when you told her about your dream, you know, sometimes we say to our kids, "Oh, it's just a dream," just to comfort them. But then she's asking, what were their faces like? You know, what did they say to you? So she's also, you know, the other side of her's kicking in, that she knows that there, you know, potentially is something in this, and is just kind of checking it out quite knowingly.
Yes, because she was used to seeing things in the house. We all were, and used to paranormal things happening in that house. So
Yeah. What else did you see in that house?
we all saw things. My mother mostly saw dead relatives and the ghost of a little girl. My sisters saw things appearing. My brother, he's very psychic. He got out of that house as fast as he could, and remarked to my sister at one time, "You wouldn't believe some of the things I've seen in that house."
Oh gosh.
There was a lot of activity, not just inside the house, but in the neighborhood. I remember children at my primary school, which was just up the road, a couple of roads up, talking about things that happened in their homes as well, seeing things.
Yeah, it sounds like a really, you know, charged place, and I would, wonder if people are still living in those homes now, experiencing those sorts of things.
I'd love to know. I won't go and ask though.
No. So with the UFO as well, did your friends, did you sort of all talk about it afterwards, or did it just sort of
I don't remember, Joe. I honestly don't. I just remember seeing it, and we all ran into our own homes. And I remember telling my mum.
The thing is with kids, you know, they take things just at face value, don't they? They just, oh yeah, there's a UFO. That's really exciting. And then the next day they're on to, you know, where they're building their latest den or something like that. It's it's just all, this is the world, and love it. What do you think was the purpose of their visit? Apart from taking you away, did you ever feel that you learned anything new, or had some, you know, did you end up with any ideas that you think you could attribute to those experiences?
Oh gosh, I was so young. Well, I think that I definitely saw the world in a different way to the majority of other children that I knew, and vast majority of adults that I knew, I felt like I was a very different kind of person, because other children didn't seem to resonate.
Yeah.
I didn't get along with many children. I was a very sensitive child. No, I don't mean crying or anything like that. I mean, it's like I could see through people
Yeah.
into their inner being.
Yes.
And I've been told that I have that ability. A building I used to work for lawyers in the States, and the building we were in had a few therapists so in it as well. And one of them, we were chatting one time, and she said, "People are afraid of you because you can see straight into their soul." I don't know
Yeah.
how true that is, but I do feel I can see into people's true nature.
So then, growing up, how did you make sense of everything that you had experienced as a child?
I didn't dwell on it. It was part of my world.
Yeah.
Seeing things that were, well, how can I put this? Seeing the unusual was not unusual for me. I have seen so much throughout my life. I've seen spirits, ghosts. They usually appear to me as just regular people until afterwards I realized that, oh, that wasn't a living person. I've never reacted. It's always just been a part of the natural life. Really, I don't know how else to put it. I don't see it as unusual or different. I see it as things that occur now and again that don't happen every day, but they do occur, and it's part of things that naturally happen in my life, and if not everybody else's life. So yeah.
And what do you think that fairies are? What's your sense of what they are? And I mean, there's no real answer to this, is there? But I just wondered what
I think there are many dimensions or many parallel existences that we are not usually aware of, and they can cross over into, or may accidentally cross over into, or intentionally come into ours. I think they're alternate dimensions of existence, parallel existence.
Yes.
Time to
I know you'll join me in thanking our guest for sharing such a personal experience. The initial encounter takes our guest by surprise. It's not so much surprise that they entered her home, as she had seen them in the garden, and she wasn't afraid of them, but she was surprised that they came onto the bed. At the point of communication, she loses any further memory, which is interesting. The phenomenon of amnesia is seen throughout fairy folklore, and shares similarities with alien and UFO abduction reports. The dream with the windows flying open and the rug levitating out of the window is very disconcerting to hear. There's a sense that the fairies were visiting regularly and involving our guest in some kind of journey. And by this I mean her astral body was travelling while her physical body stayed in the room. Either during or after the journey, her physical body would walk down the stairs in a sleepwalk trance, perhaps as a kind of processing method. Of course, I am simply offering here what could potentially have taken place. We just don't know, but we are free to explore possibilities. The idea of otherworldly beings visiting a child and potentially taking them on an adventure is a scary thought to us humans, but as children we explore all realms through our imaginations. Isn't that our natural state? Why wouldn't we visit other realms as we do in our dreams? Why wouldn't we be guided there by fae folk? We just don't know where they visited or why, but here's an intriguing piece of information that fellow researcher Thomas Fries has revealed to me. Some adults who remember their childhood fairy experiences report having been brought to a certain location, often a field or forest, along with other children, and they remember being educated by otherworldly beings. Thomas will be coming on the podcast soon to discuss this further, and I'm really looking forward to that. Whatever the fairies were doing, they seemed to be on a mission. They were happy and excited, and the leader was very focused. Again, as with other fairy encounters, there was eye contact, but there was no sense of fear felt by our guest. This is important to remember. We're often immediately afraid of the unknown, but it's not necessarily frightening. And while these experiences are rare, there are similar reports that we can turn to. Simon Young's Fairy Census is an excellent resource of contemporary accounts collected from 2014 to 2017. It's freely available online, and I'll leave a link on the show notes at scarletofthefae.com. The following excerpt bears some similarities to the experience we just heard. This took place in the early 1950s in Scotland, when the person sharing was a little boy, just 7 years old. I had been sharing a bedroom with my older brother, who was about 18 at the time, but he left to join the army, so I was left on my own in the room. I went to sleep as normal, but woke after a time to find a group of the little people dancing around on the floor at the head of my bed. I know I had a conversation with what appeared to be the leader of the group, but at this distance of time I couldn't say what it was about. This went on for some months on a more or less nightly basis, but gradually the interval between appearances became longer and longer until it stopped altogether. And this one took place in the 1960s to a woman in New York who was under 10 years old at the time. Not sure when it began as a child, but I know that it ended on my 10th birthday because I recall the disappointment and correlate that year. They came to me in my sleep very often, and the purpose was always the same, to take me to fly above the rooftops and treetops throughout my neighbourhood as a very exciting treat. I thought for years it was just an odd recurring dream, but the details of things I saw from that bird's eye view would be impossible to have been a dream. In latter years I was able to understand and recall more emotional details. I don't recall the first or last time they came, but I know no actual words were spoken. They were fluid-like beings and were dressed in material that barely covered and was white and thin, and always flowing as they too never touched the ground, although they had legs and feet. I went willingly and trusting, as I knew it was under my control where I was to fly and when I was to return. I now feel that there was an exchange that occurred. And Marjorie Johnson collected fairy experiences during the 1950s as part of the Fairy Investigation Society. The following two accounts are featured in Seeing Fairies, which is edited and published posthumously by Simon Young. It's by a Dr. Victor Purcell from 1951. He was then a lecturer at Cambridge. In the year 1900 to 1901, during the South African War, when I was about 5 years of age, I lived in Kent. Every night for some months, after my mother had kissed me good night and shut my bedroom door, there was a short interval, and then I would begin to hear distant, massed, Lilliputian bands. The music grew louder and louder as it came nearer and nearer. There was a night light burning on the mantelpiece, and by the light of this I saw column after column of tiny soldiers marching up from the right of my bed over my eider down, and across to the other side, where they disappeared over the bedside. Each soldier was about 9 inches high and wore a red coat. There was battalion after battalion of them, and each was headed by a brass band. The march past lasted for a few minutes, and then I fell asleep. The direction was always from right to left. I never tried to touch the soldiers, but they were completely real. I actually did see them, and I should be prepared to state this on an oath, if necessary, in any court of law. And this one from a Mrs. Georgina Everson of Tunbridge Wells, Kent. The first time was in the early hours of the morning. I was then living in a house near Queen's Park in Brondesbury, London, and my room overlooked a very nice garden. On opening my eyes, I was thrilled and very surprised to see on the top of my bed covers a group of gnomes, all of the same height and proportions. They wore tight-fitting suits of various woodland shades, shoes that turned up at the toes, and tasselled stocking-style caps. All of them had long grey beards and faces like little old men. There were 6 or 7 of them, between 15 and 18 inches high, and with hands clasped to form a circle. They were dancing merrily in perfect rhythm. I watched, entranced, for a few minutes, and then they disappeared. One of these gnomes has often appeared to me, quite alone, since then, and he always stands at the foot of my bed, looking at me, very intently, in a friendly way. And we even have 17th century written accounts of such experiences. In Janet Board's Fairies, Real Encounters with the Little People, we can read the following description written by John Lewis of Cardiganshire, Wales, in 1656, describing a then recent experience of someone he knew. A man and his family being all in bed, about after midnight, awake in bed he could perceive a light entering a little room where he lay, and one after another of some a dozen in the shape of men, and 2 or 3 women, with small children in their arms, entering in, and they seemed to dance, and the room to be far lighter and wider than formerly. They did seem to eat bread and cheese, all about a kind of tick upon the ground. They offered him meat, and would smile upon him. He could perceive no voice, but he once, calling to God to bless him, he could perceive the whisper of a voice in Welsh, bidding him hold his peace. Being about 4 hours thus, he did what he could to wake his wife, and could not. They went out into another room, and after some dancing, departed. And then he arose, yet being but a very small room, he could not find the door, nor the way into bed, until crying out, his wife and family awakened. Being within about 2 miles of me, I sent for the man, who was an honest poor husbandman, and of good report, and I made him believe I would put him to oath for the truth of this relation, who was very ready to take it. So we are left as usual with more questions than answers. I do wonder if this share may have had quite a profound effect on some listeners, as it did with me, so please do get in touch and share your thoughts and feelings. Even though we are no closer to fully understanding the workings of the universe, it does feel like something is emerging. Perhaps that something is simply shared experience, and the openness with which we can discuss these sorts of encounters. It's powerful, and that's why we keep talking about them. We are recognizing that there's so much more to this world than we're taught, so we gather together and explore these mysteries. If you want to hear further from our chat, a bonus episode available exclusively at Patreon delves further into our conversation. Thank you for listening to the end. If you've enjoyed this, then please share on with a friend. Maybe they need to hear this too. Now, more than ever, we are shifting closer to what could be termed as spiritual enlightenment. Perhaps more will be revealed in time. Who knows, but it feels right to keep an open mind and always remain curious.